The night. A time for rest. A time for dreams. But for some, it becomes a waking nightmare. They are trapped. Their bodies are still. Their minds are racing. This is the terrifying reality of sleep paralysis. Imagine waking up in the darkness. You can't move. You can't speak. You feel an overwhelming sense of dread. And then you sense it. A presence in the room. Something is watching you. This isn't just a bad dream. It's a phenomenon that has haunted humanity for centuries. We find it described in ancient folklore and medical texts. It's often accompanied by hallucinations, both visual and auditory. These hallucinations take many forms. Shadowy figures lurking in the corners of the room. Demons perched on their chest, stealing their breath. Whispers slithering through their minds, driving them to the edge of sanity. The rational mind struggles to explain these events. Science offers us the term sleep paralysis. It explains the physical sensations. It tells us it's a glitch in the sleep-wake cycle. But this knowledge does little to ease the terror. The sufferers are left with a chilling question. What if it's more than just a physiological phenomenon? What if these terrifying experiences hint at something darker, something beyond our understanding? Tonight, we delve into the abyss of true sleep paralysis horror stories. We will hear the chilling tales of those who have faced the unspeakable. Their experiences will challenge your perception of reality. Get ready. Brace yourself. For the next few minutes, we're entering a world where sleep offers no escape. A world where fear reigns supreme. Sarah had always been a woman of logic. Ghosts, demons, and things that went bump in the night. All nonsense in her book. She scoffed at those who claimed otherwise. The world was a place of reason, her mind a fortress of rationality, until the night it happened. She had just moved into a charming old apartment. It had character, history whispered from the chipped paint and creaking floorboards. The first few nights were peaceful, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the city. Then came the night her world tilted on its axis. She woke with a start. The room was cloaked in darkness, the heavy air thick with a strange energy. Panic clawed at her throat. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. It was as if an invisible weight held her captive, her body frozen in place. Her mind, however, was a whirlwind of terror. She had read about sleep paralysis, dismissed it as a harmless anomaly. Now, trapped in its grip, she felt a chill crawl down her spine. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. At the foot of her bed, a shadow coalesced from the darkness. It was a void in the shape of a man, edges blurring into the gloom. No features, no details, just an absence of light that sent shivers down her spine. Fear, raw and primal, washed over her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silence. She tried to scream, to cry out, but her voice was trapped, a prisoner in her throat. The shadow remained motionless. Yet Sarah felt a palpable presence. An aura of malice emanated from it, suffocating her with its intensity. It was as if the very air had grown heavy with dread, each breath a struggle. Time lost all meaning. Seconds stretched into an eternity as she lay there, imprisoned by the paralysis, her gaze locked on the shadowy figure at the foot of her bed. Just when she thought she could take no more, the paralysis began to recede. The shadowy figure flickered, its edges dissolving back into the darkness. Sarah gasped for air, her body trembling with the echo of terror. She sat up in bed, her mind racing. Had it been real or just a nightmare? The line between the two seemed to blur, the fear lingering like a bad taste in her mouth. She tried to rationalize the experience. It had to be stress, she told herself. The move, the new apartment, it was all getting to her. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. The next few nights were torture. Sleep, once a sanctuary, became a battleground. She lay awake, eyes wide open, staring into the darkness, dreading the moment she would drift off, only to be trapped again. The shadow returned. Night after night, it stood at the foot of her bed, a silent, menacing sentinel. The fear became her constant companion, gnawing at her sanity. Desperate, Sarah dove into research. She scoured the internet, devouring articles and forums dedicated to sleep paralysis. The experiences she read about mirrored her own. The shadowy figures, the feeling of being watched, the overwhelming terror. She learned about the science behind it, the disruption of the sleep-wake cycle, the intrusion of REM sleep into wakefulness. But none of it explained the sheer malevolence she felt emanating from the shadow. The more she read, the more she realized that many cultures had their own interpretations of sleep paralysis. Demons, incubi, succubi, all preying on the vulnerable, their dark intentions hidden in the shadows of the night. One article mentioned a therapist who specialized in sleep disorders. Hope, fragile but persistent, flickered within her. Maybe, just maybe, this therapist could offer some answers, some relief from the nightly torment. With trembling hands, Sarah reached for her phone. It was time to face her fears, to seek help from someone who might understand the darkness that had invaded her sleep. She just hoped it wasn't too late. John had always been the envy of his friends when it came to sleep. He could fall asleep anywhere, anytime. His sleep was deep, dreamless, a nightly escape from the world's worries. He took pride in his ability to slumber through anything. "I'm like a hibernating bear," he'd joke. "Nothing wakes me once I'm out." But John's world was about to be shaken, his peaceful nights shattered by an experience that would change his relationship with sleep forever. It started subtly, a sense of unease as he drifted off, a feeling of being watched, a prickling at the back of his neck. He dismissed it as stress, the pressures of work manifesting in his subconscious. He had no idea that something far more sinister was lurking on the edge of his awareness. Then came the night he woke with a gasp, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The room was dark, the silence heavy and oppressive. He tried to move, to sit up, but his body refused to obey. He was paralyzed, trapped in a prison of his own flesh. Fear, cold and sharp, sliced through him. He tried to call out, but his voice was gone, stolen by the suffocating darkness that seemed to press down on him. He strained to breathe, each inhale a shallow gasp. Then he felt it, a weight on his chest, heavy, suffocating. It was as if an invisible entity had settled on top of him, its unseen claws digging into his flesh. Panic surged through him, a tidal wave of terror threatening to drown him in its intensity. He thrashed against the invisible weight, his silent struggle only amplifying the feeling of helplessness. His eyes darted around the room, but the darkness held no answers, only the reflection of his own fear in the window pane. The pressure on his chest increased, stealing the air from his lungs. He was going to die, he realized, suffocated by an unseen force in the darkness of his own bedroom. The thought was a cold whisper in the back of his mind, a terrifying certainty that propelled him deeper into panic. Time became meaningless. Seconds stretched into an eternity as he struggled against the invisible weight, his mind screaming for release. He was caught in a waking nightmare, his body a traitor in its stillness. Just when he thought he could take no more, the pressure lifted. The weight vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a residue of terror that clung to him like a shroud. He gasped for air, his lungs burning with the effort. He lay there for what felt like hours, his body still trembling, his mind a battlefield of confusion and fear. Had it been real? Or had his mind played a cruel trick on him, conjuring up a terror that felt all too real? He wanted to believe it was just a bad dream, a manifestation of stress or an overactive imagination. But deep down, he knew better. Something had been in the room with him, something dark and malevolent. Section 4. The Search for Answers. The next day, he scoured the internet for anything that could explain what he had experienced. He stumbled upon the term sleep paralysis, his heart pounding as he read countless accounts that mirrored his own. He learned about the science behind it, the disruption of the sleep-wake cycle, the intrusion of hallucinations into the waking world. But the scientific explanations did little to ease his fear. The terror of that night, the feeling of being pinned down by an unseen force, lingered like a bad taste in his mouth. He tried to tell himself it was just a physiological phenomenon, nothing to be afraid of, but the rational part of his mind was losing ground to the primal fear that whispered in the darkness. He was no longer the sound sleeper, the man who laughed at nightmares. He was haunted, his nights plagued by the dread of what might return. Section 5. Facing the unknown. He tried everything to prevent it from happening again. He changed his sleep schedule, avoided caffeine and alcohol, even resorted to sleeping with the lights on. But the fear remained, a constant companion that cast a long shadow over his life. He knew he couldn't run from it forever. He had to face his fear, to confront the darkness that had invaded his nights. He began to research coping mechanisms, meditation techniques, anything that might give him a sense of control over the terrifying experience. He knew the next time the paralysis came, he wouldn't be a passive victim. He would fight, he would resist, he would stare into the abyss of his fear and demand answers from the unseen force that haunted his sleep. Section 1. The Whispers Begin. Emily was a creature of habit. Her life was a symphony of order. Her work, her relationships, even her sleep followed a predictable rhythm. She found comfort in the familiar, the mundane. So when the whispers began, they chipped away at the very foundation of her reality. It started subtly, a murmur at the edge of her hearing as she drifted off to sleep. She dismissed it as the city sounds, the hum of traffic, the distant murmur of neighbors, but the whispers persisted, growing more distinct with each passing night. One night she woke with a jolt. The room was dark, the silence absolute except for the whispers. They swirled around her, a chorus of disembodied voices, too soft to decipher, yet their presence undeniable. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. She tried to sit up, to turn on the light, but her body refused to obey. Panic seized her as she realized she was paralyzed, her limbs heavy, her voice trapped in her throat. The whispers intensified, slithering into her mind, wrapping around her thoughts like icy tendrils. They were closer now, more urgent, their tone shifting from a murmur to an insistent hiss. Emily strained to make out words, some meaning in the chaotic symphony of sound, but it was futile. She was adrift in a sea of whispers, her fear growing with each passing moment. The darkness seemed to press in on her, the silence amplifying the whispers, turning them into a deafening roar inside her head. Time twisted in on itself. Minutes felt like hours as she lay there, imprisoned by the paralysis, the whispers her only companions. She felt a presence in the room, something unseen, something malevolent, and she was certain the whispers were its voice. Just when she thought she could take no more, the whispers began to recede. They faded into the darkness, leaving behind a ringing silence that was somehow more unnerving than the sound itself. Emily lay in the darkness, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The silence was heavy, pregnant with the echo of the whispers. Sleep, once a refuge, was now a terrifying prospect. The next few nights were a blur of exhaustion and dread. She tried everything to keep the whispers at bay, sleeping with the lights on, playing music, even resorting to earplugs. But the voices always found her, slithering through the cracks of her defenses, their whispers turning into taunts, their presence a constant torment. She sought solace in logic, telling herself it was just a trick of her mind, a manifestation of stress. But deep down, a primal fear took root, whispering that something darker was at play. The whispers grew bolder, their tone shifting from murmurs to distinct voices. She couldn't understand the words, but their tone was unmistakable. They were mocking her, threatening her, their laughter echoing in the silence of her room. Desperate for answers, Emily confided in a friend, a skeptic like herself. Her friend listened patiently, then offered logical explanations: sleep paralysis, auditory hallucinations, the power of suggestion. Emily clung to these explanations, seeking comfort in the rationale. She researched sleep disorders, devoured articles, and even considered seeing a doctor. But the fear lingered, fueled by the nightly torment, the ever-present whispers that seemed to mock her attempts at logic and reason. She stumbled upon online forums, communities of people sharing their own experiences with sleep paralysis and night terrors. She read countless accounts of whispering voices, shadowy figures, and the feeling of an unseen presence. The stories, while terrifying, offered a strange sense of comfort. She wasn't alone. But this comfort was a double-edged sword, for it also confirmed her worst fears, that what she was experiencing was real, that the whispers were more than just a figment of her imagination. One night, as the whispers began their nightly torment, a new resolve washed over Emily. She would not be a victim. She would not cower in fear. She would fight back. As the voices swirled around her, she focused on their source, picturing them as tendrils of darkness, and with all her might, she mentally shoved back. The whispers faltered, their tone shifting from mocking laughter to confusion. Encouraged, Emily pushed harder, her fear replaced by a surge of defiance. She felt a tingling sensation in her limbs, the paralysis beginning to loosen its grip. The whispers grew frantic, their tone desperate, as if sensing their hold on her slipping away. Emily opened her mouth and screamed, a sound born of terror and defiance, and the whispers shattered, vanishing into the silence like smoke on the wind. Three souls, three stories, each a chilling testament to the terror that can lurk in the shadows of our minds. Sarah, John, and Emily, each touched by the darkness of sleep paralysis, their lives forever altered by the experience. Their stories, though unique in their details, share a common thread: the feeling of utter helplessness, the bone-chilling terror of being trapped in one's own body, the mind a captive audience to the horrors it conjures. We, as listeners, are left to grapple with the unsettling reality of their experiences. Were these encounters merely the result of a neurological glitch, a misfiring in the brain's complex machinery? Or do they hint at something more, something that defies our understanding of the natural world? The rational mind seeks comfort in scientific explanations, in the reassurance that these events, however terrifying, are nothing more than a trick of the mind. But the heart, the seat of our deepest fears, cannot help but wonder if there is truth to the whispers of something darker, something that lurks just beyond the veil of our perception. Sleep paralysis, in its essence, is a betrayal of the mind by the body. It is a state of liminality, a disorienting space between wakefulness and sleep, where the boundaries of reality blur and the subconscious reigns supreme. In this vulnerable state, we are at the mercy of our deepest fears, our anxieties given form in the shadows that dance at the edge of our perception. The shadowy figures, the suffocating presence, the whispering voices, all manifestations of our inner demons, given life by the power of the subconscious mind. But what if these hallucinations, these figments of our imagination, are more than just random firings of neurons? What if they offer us a glimpse into a realm beyond our everyday understanding, a realm where the boundaries of reality are fluid and the unseen has the power to touch our lives? The human mind, for all its complexity, remains a mystery. It is a vast, uncharted territory, and within its depths lie both the potential for great beauty and unimaginable terror. Sleep paralysis, in its own unsettling way, reminds us of this duality, of the fragile line that separates the rationale from the unknown. The stories of Sarah, John, and Emily serve as cautionary tales, reminding us of the power of fear, the vulnerability of the human mind, and the unsettling reality that some things defy explanation. They challenge us to confront our own relationship with the unknown, to acknowledge the possibility that our understanding of the world, for all its scientific advancements, is still incomplete. The universe is a vast and mysterious place, and our place within it remains shrouded in wonder and uncertainty. As we emerge from the darkness of these tales, we are left with a lingering sense of unease, a reminder that the line between the rational and the inexplicable is often blurred. Perhaps in the quiet moments, when the lights are low and the shadows grow long, we might catch a glimpse of something moving at the edge of our vision, a whisper carried on the wind, a touch of the unseen that sends shivers down our spine. And in those moments, we are reminded that the world is a far stranger, more wondrous and perhaps more terrifying place than we could ever imagine. The darkness holds its secrets close, and sometimes in the quiet hours of the night, it whispers them to us in our sleep.